Support comes from Cambium Landscape, since 1998 collaborating with their clients, architects, and interior designers to create landscapes that complement their lifestyles, providing design, construction, and maintenance. Designing now for summer outdoor dining and recreation. Portfolio at cambiumlandscape.com. Support comes from Pacific Science Center. Pack-size Camps for Curious Minds offer more than 100 summer camps for grades pre-K through 8 across the Seattle area, with new locations in Kenmore and Bothell. More info available at pacsci.org/camps.
The cost of childcare is at an all-time high. The typical American family with young kids now spends more on childcare than housing.
Last year, my husband and I spent about $60,000 on childcare. That's an insane number.
I'm looking at daycares. I'm about to have a kid in 10 weeks. It's like $1,000 a week. If one of us is making $4K a month, we may as well quit our job.
It's reaching a crisis point for many families, and politicians like the new mayors of New York and Seattle are taking note.
This will be felt by expanded subsidies for tens of thousands of additional families. It will be felt when parents look at their bank accounts at the end of the year and see that they have saved more than $20,000 per child.
Every parent knows that finding childcare is difficult, but finding affordable childcare is next to impossible.
The National Chamber of Commerce estimates states lose billions of dollars a year in economic activity. That's because the lack of affordable childcare keeps parents out of the workforce and cripples family budgets.
In most of the developed world, the government pays for childcare so parents can work and contribute to the economy. But free, universal childcare is nearly unheard of in the U.S.
At least it was, until a few months ago. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
I'm Joshua McNichols, and this is Booming.
Today, what can Washington learn from a state that managed to pull off free, universal childcare? That's coming up.
I'm a firm believer that nature is healing. In these chaotic times, I invite you to take a breath and reconnect with our natural world. Wow, right in front of us. I'm Chris Morgan. Join me on The Wild as we explore stories of hope and resilience in nature. We'll bring you up close to some extraordinary species and learn how they are finding ways to adapt and thrive in fast-changing environments. Listen to The Wild on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm sorry, is there anything else that you could actually do for us here, please?
Honestly, without a job, I can't do squat.
Okay, I can't get a job if I can't afford daycare.
Well, we have access to subsidized daycare grants once you have a job.
I need a job to prove that I need daycare in order to get a job? What kind of is that?
Joshua, I feel like it's been forever since we've been in the studio together.
I know, we've had these sort of solo episodes, which are fun, but, I miss seeing your face across the room and being able to sort of banter with you a little bit.
I know. I feel like I haven't really fully done my reporting until I've given you the download. And I miss you too. I'm glad we're here to talk about one of my favorite topics, childcare.
Yes. And, I've heard you over the months and years talking about schlepping your kids to and from childcare and how much work that is. And it reminds me of when I used to have to do that when my kids were little. It's years away now. And it did make our lives very complicated. But we live in a place with fewer kids than other cities. So, this may not be automatically relevant to everyone. So for the majority of people who don't have children under 5, why does this issue matter?
It's a good question. And if you'll bear with me, I want to answer it with some numbers. So in the Seattle area, it costs about $27,000 a year to send one kid to daycare. Give or take, depending on their age. It can be a little bit less or a little bit more. But if you have 2 kids in daycare, you're spending about $55,000 a year.
That is so high. I mean, when I first heard we were doing this episode, I looked back at some old numbers from our family. 16 years ago, we had our daughter in infant care, and we were paying $14,400 a year, which is about half of the $27,000 people have to pay for one kid now.
Yeah, it's gone up a lot since then. Just since 2020, the cost of childcare has increased about 30%. So that means just to pay for childcare alone, if you factor in taxes, you would need to be making a salary of about $70,000 a year. And you couldn't afford housing, food, cars, anything else you might need without a second salary.
So 100% of that salary goes to childcare and taxes. I mean, that's just astounding.
Right. And if you're trying to get into a field like teaching or firefighting where salaries start around $70K and you've got young kids, it probably doesn't pencil out.
Okay, so there's clearly an impact on the workforce. You know, it seems like this may be stating the obvious, but that kind of cost could discourage people from working, especially if they make less than $70K a year. And we need all the teachers and firefighters that we can get.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not obvious unless you're going through it. There are a lot of people who want to work but can't. I've talked to them in my reporting and in my personal life. And that has downstream effects too. Fewer people working means a smaller tax base. There was this one study, for example, that found in Florida, they lose more than $900 million a year in tax revenue because of the childcare crisis.
Okay, so they're losing money because they don't have childcare. So there is a cost of, I guess, $900 million to not having affordable childcare. But it would also cost the government a lot if it just paid for childcare. There's a cost to that too.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be a big line item on any government budget. And that's one of the main reasons that it hasn't really taken off here in the U.S. A lot of people actually thought it was impossible here. But in November, New Mexico became the first state to launch free universal childcare for its residents. Now New Mexico will cover the cost of daycare for basically any resident who's raising kids.
Wow. Okay, so how does this work?
Yeah, I've been wondering the same thing since this program launched, so I got in touch with the department that runs it. I was able to sit down with the cabinet secretary for New Mexico's Early Childhood Education and Care Department. Her name is Elizabeth Groginsky, and I started off by just asking her how it works.
So in New Mexico, if you are working or in school or doing job search, you can access childcare subsidy from the state to pay for your childcare. There is no income limit. And for grandparents raising grandchildren, they don't have to be working or in school or doing job search. And also for families caring for children with substance exposure or housing instability, regardless of your income, you can get access to childcare assistance. They do have to apply through the department, and then we pay the provider directly for the care of their children.
And it doesn't cost parents anything?
No co-payments. Providers are not allowed to charge them more than the state pays if they decide to be part of universal childcare, and that includes any fees or other things on a regular basis.
How much does this whole thing cost the state?
This year, our budget is around $450 million. I'm going to get that exact. I think it's about $454 million. The governor has asked for another $160 million for fiscal year 27, which will take us a little over $600 million to keep up with the uptake. As we've seen time over time, this is the third or fourth time that the governor has increased or has changed eligibility, I should say. Now there is no income eligibility. In our out years, we've projected out to fiscal year 29, and we're around $750 million when we'll be serving 60,000 children.
Okay, so I want to pause here just for a second because there were a lot of numbers in that last bit of talking that she did. There was one number that jumped out at me, though, and that was $600 million, which is the total cost of this program every year to the state of New Mexico. And I just want to try to give listeners a sense of how much that is. It's about enough to build 1,200 affordable apartments in the city of Seattle. So it's not a trivial amount.
No, not at all.
So how is New Mexico paying for it?
Well, New Mexico is a little unique in that it has these endowments that are funded by taxes on its oil and gas industry. Since the funds are invested, they're an ongoing source of wealth for the state. And that is largely paying for the child care program, so it's not really a burden on taxpayers. The program also gets some federal funding.
Okay, so it's like got this trust fund of its own.
Yeah.
And a little help from its parents,
Exactly.
from the government. But, we know in government budgets, there are always trade-offs. That's $600 million that's not going toward housing or transportation or other investments.
It's true. I asked Secretary Groginsky about those trade-offs, and she basically said this is an investment in New Mexico's economy that she expects to pay off.
I think in a few ways. One is as we get more childcare businesses opening and families supporting, they're hiring locally, they're often buying locally. So we've got a multiplier effect with just good small businesses being developed across the state. The economics of families who've been paying this very substantial childcare payment are now putting those dollars into buying a house or to saving, to making sure that they have a little bit of an emergency fund or being able to spend money in the economy in ways that support their children. And then our industries, we're saying we need a workforce. We need more police officers in the state, more educators, more health professionals. And so we see this as a way to say we can partner with industry, we can help build that supply, and we become a very attractive place for industry to come and start their businesses. So overall, I think that what we've seen, and we haven't done it here in New Mexico, but you've seen some of these studies of the billions of dollars that we lose just in our economy because people aren't working, and they can't work because they can't afford the childcare or they don't have access to it.
Yeah, because you would imagine if a family is no longer spending $2,000 a month on childcare, maybe they're going out to eat once a week,
Exactly.
or
Right.
a parent is getting another job, and you would be getting sales and income taxes from those kinds
Exactly.
of things. Is that the
That's
idea?
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Why did the governor change the income eligibility requirement?
We changed it in 22. When she first came into office, she changed it to 200. And then in 22, we changed it to 400% of the federal poverty level. That includes about 80% of New Mexico families who fall into that category of needing care, working or in school. And, if you're at 401%, you get no help, or 402%. And truly, our firefighters, our educators, our police officers, if they're a two-income family falling into one of those critical jobs that we have here in the state, they're at 500 or 600% federal poverty level. And so we said, moderate and low-income families all need help paying for childcare.
Yeah, this is something that you hear a lot covering this issue, that there is help at the lowest income levels, and if you're at the highest income levels, you don't necessarily need help. But actually, the middle is quite large just because childcare is so expensive, even if a family is making what might be considered a decent income. The other stakeholder group that you often hear from when covering childcare who say this really isn't working in the traditional way is the childcare workers themselves, who say, in some cases, I could make more money going to work for Starbucks, even though I really love this work. So how much are the childcare workers in New Mexico being paid?
Yes, and that is a local business decision, but I can give you an example of when we were the first state in the country and after the District of Columbia that used the cost model to set and inform our rates. And so we set that entry-level wage in 2021 at $12.10 an hour because that was pretty much what the highest minimum wage in the state. Of course, shortly after that, pandemic came and everybody was paying $17 an hour, $15, $16 to do almost any job. And so we used some of our relief money to do a $3 an hour raise to get at least people to $15, that providers would have revenues to be able to meet that $15. And now more recently, we raised it to $18 as the entry level floor, with the higher quality centers paying closer to $21. And so we put some of those mandates into our rulemaking if providers opt into that enhanced rate.
So in other words, if a child care center wants to be reimbursed by the state at a higher rate, wants to get more money, then it can guarantee that it's going to pay its workers a higher wage.
Exactly. And they also have to agree to be open 10 hours a day, 5 days a week to support the working family.
Okay, I want to jump in here with a quick interjection. This reminds me a little bit of the situation with elder care, like nursing facilities, where the government is involved in setting the prices, through Medicaid. They say, yeah, we'll cover the cost of your care, but we'll only pay up to this amount. And there's a declining number of elder care facilities that will take Medicaid patients because they lose money on them. So I know this isn't an apples to apples comparison, but it's been on my mind, and I guess it just feels like something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime the state is capping what you can charge for something, it can get complicated. But at least right now, this is a good wage in one of the poorest states in the country. And Secretary Groginsky says that they are very rapidly adding workers. So right now, I don't think it's an issue, but I do think that's going to be an outstanding question as this program scales.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back to your interview.
You hinted at the skepticism that universal childcare often receives in this country. You know, it's talked about as pie in the sky, that it's too expensive, it's too hard to implement. You know, I know personally, having 2 kids in childcare right now, how much turnover there can be. How are you managing to find enough workers to meet all of this demand?
Yes, we've estimated that, as we grow, we're going to need about 5,000 more early childhood educators. Part of our strategy is to build the supply of what we call registered homes, the more licensed exempt, and so they can serve up to 4 children. And that's,
so in-home daycare?
Yeah, in-home childcare and home educators. And then we have licensed homes, and we have licensed group homes, which are larger. They can serve up to 12. And then what we saw some very promising results in December. The first 4 days of December, we had 100 applicants for background checks to come work in childcare. All of December last year, we had 40. And then, of course, we're tracking the number of families coming in for eligibility for childcare assistance, what income level they're at, what's the age of their child, what kind of care are they choosing. And it's exciting to see that most of the families and the children that we're supporting are in those higher quality centers. We're seeing more providers say, what is this quality thing? Let me learn more about it. I want to get some of those higher rates. So I feel it's a win-win-win. And we're seeing industry leaders, step up.
Monica, listening to this, it just brings to mind the big national controversy right now over government funding for childcare. So how does New Mexico fit into this, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is they're not really related. But childcare is in the news a lot right now. The federal government and lots of states do subsidize some childcare, typically for low-income families. And those subsidies have become the subject of scrutiny in places like Minneapolis, where there are accusations of daycare centers committing fraud. Now, that story is pretty complicated, and we don't know exactly what's going on, but it's definitely put this issue under the microscope.
Okay.
In New Mexico, they get a little bit of federal funding, but they're mostly paying for this on their own. And that federal funding right now is not in jeopardy. It's not part of the funding freeze that the Trump administration tried to take against a handful of other Democrat-held states.
Okay.
But that being said, I did ask Secretary Groginsky about this, just about the national interest in government-subsidized childcare and how they're safeguarding against perceptions of fraud and keeping that federal funding that they get safe. And she said that the New Mexico program has a lot of layers of oversight to prevent fraud. The childcare centers go through a licensing process with the state, and then there's a verification process for families too. And then the department goes through weekly and monthly reviews from staff and independent auditors. All of that controversy aside, a lot of states are looking at New Mexico and seeing what lessons can be learned. And so I ended the conversation by asking Secretary Groginsky if she thinks New Mexico could become an example for other states.
Absolutely, yes. The governor, and I've said many times that we have the blueprint for the nation in how to make this happen. And while it does take investments and revenues, those investments will pay off in just better outcomes for children, families, and business.
Great. Well, Secretary Groginsky, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you, Monica.
So, Monica, we've covered a lot in this episode so far. So, what are your biggest takeaways?
Well, in some ways, New Mexico is unique. It's got this oil and gas industry that it can make a lot of money from, and it has chosen to use that money to invest in families in this way. But it does seem like a lot of other places are thinking about how they can leverage their resources that they have to expand childcare access. What stands out to me is just how much the conversation around universal childcare has changed in the past couple of years. It was a really central issue in the Seattle and New York mayor's races, and a lot of people thought that those were maybe just like empty campaign promises that were going to be too hard to implement once these people got elected. But then we just saw Zoran Mamdani and the governor of New York come out with this plan to start expanding childcare access. New Mexico's charging ahead. It seems like in just a few years, it's gone from a fantasy to something that could really happen more broadly in the U.S.
Do you think we could see it here in Washington state?
Well, a lot of elected officials here in Washington say that this is something they want to do, but we'd need a dedicated, ongoing funding source that we don't have now. Something like the millionaire's tax that Governor Ferguson is calling for. Washington already spends more than New Mexico on childcare, if you can believe it, and that's just in the subsidies for low-income families. Childcare costs a lot more here. So the price tag to extend those programs to everyone would be substantial.
Why do you think childcare has become such a hot topic in the last year?
It's a good question because, like we said, it is something that only a slice of the population deals with on a daily basis. But I think it's part of this broader affordability crisis that's just becoming impossible for elected officials to ignore. The basic building blocks of the American dream, like owning a home or having a family or pursuing a career while having a family, are just not accessible to most of the population. And that's driving really rapid change, I think.
Wow. Well, I'm excited to hear what happens with this program. Thank you for bringing us this story, Monica.
I'm happy to talk about this anytime.
That's it for Booming. Thank you for listening.
If there's something that you want us to cover, you can email us at booming@kuow.org or leave us a voicemail at 206-221-7158.
And we've had some donors to the show, and of course, thank you to these donors. If you want to join them and be a donor too, then you can go to kuow.org/booming. And thank you.
Our producers are Lucy Suchek and Alec Cowan. Our editor is Carol Smith. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
And I'm Joshua McNichols.
We'll see you next time.
Everything is expensive in Seattle. But when it comes to restaurants, I got a lot of tricks and tips up my sleeve to help diners eat well in this city. I'm Ton Venn, host of Seattle Eats, a food podcast from the Seattle Times and KUOW, part of the NPR network. I'll share about the latest buzz in the Seattle food scene, like the hottest openings and the best bites that are worth your money. Listen now to Seattle Eats on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.